All right. I think everyone can see my screen right now. Hi everyone. My name is Lavasani. I work for Corsair in sales and marketing, and I'm a committee member for Women in Esports. I'm going to briefly talk about my intro, how I came about esports, and then alongside with Women in Esports and the intricate subjects about it, because it's a really big thing to unpack here. So I was born in the Netherlands. I'm currently living in London for the past 5 years, and I've been playing video games since I was 4 years old. My Nintendo 64 was my very first console. And then as I grew older, I started visiting internet cafes, which were still a thing at the time, growing up playing, competitive games such as StarCraft and Counter-Strike were my first main entrances. And those games were replaced with League of Legends, and I met new friends. I built community, built a small team. I visited Gamescom for the first time, and I remember clearly that the experience of being there made me feel a lot less alone, which is something that I will constantly come back to as I'm continuing on the subject in esports in general. Once I left for college, I built my own gaming PC, and this is where I started streaming Twitch for the first time. And again, continuing to becoming a part of a community and growing up, growing my Twitch channel, the esports side of the game started to grow, and there was an appetite for players to compete in tournaments. So I played competitively, and I did some offhanded casting work, and I worked to the point where I was invited to host the seasonal finals in Cologne, Germany, which was my very first big esports gig. Unfortunately, the game was outperformed and had to say its goodbyes. But I met someone who was working for a company called Face It at the time, which is a tournament organizer platform. And I volunteered to help out on games running on the platform. And that allowed me to look into a little bit of the admin side and then the backstage side of esports. So I was adminning tournaments, making sure they were running smoothly. And I went from an entertaining part of esports to a back end side of esports, and that side was a lot more fun to work with, as you tend to be a little bit more working together on a broadcast was like so much fun. And so when I was finishing up my IT degree, I finished my bachelor in IT networking and communications. And I relocated to London in 2016 and found my footing in the customer service department for Face It, and then stepped up to become a campaign manager. And then from there, I became an account manager, and then worked on several events, offline events leading up to 2020, where pretty much everything came to a halt. So that led me to look for new adventures. So I ended up working now for Corsair, which is a more corporate role, but it's still a little bit into the avenue where I'm passionate about. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience first, and then I will delve that into different subjects that will continually, there's a pattern that you're going to see. But when I was working in esports and at the events, I noticed not only how important it was to network, because that's, as Kieran said, it's really important to network, but it was so fun to do so because it all felt very natural, to meet people and even clients, from work, where it just felt like you were all part of a community. And it was just one of the many things that just kept motivating me. And looking back now, I noticed how important it was to have a role model to look up to in the industry. At the start of becoming, the admin for Dota 2, when I was working a lot of the tournament side of things, I had someone who was always there to push me and to support. And alongside that, it was also very inspiring to see many other female casters and personalities and seeing their success. And that was always also a big motivator for me to just keep working in the industry. And then eventually I would meet them. I would be working an event and I would meet one of the people that I've looked up to in the industry, and I've just it would be a completely new experience to me. So there's a reason why role models are so important, because there's still, well, not as much now, I hope, as it used to be, but there was a stigma with being interested in video games and esports. And like I said, there's potentially a lot of a lot less of that right now, but with esports becoming more mainstream, and that's something I will touch on later, these things can have an effect on performance. So, and an effect on performance can lead to potential discouragement. So whether it's performance in your job, education, or a competitive game that you're playing, there are potential added pressures that can kind of creep up on you like that. And, it could lead to, affecting your performance, which can fuel like potential stigmas like girls can only play support roles, or girls are being bad at video games. So whenever the opportunity it came from me to break the circle, that felt amazing. And like the title of the presentation says, that's where I find like a beauty in the challenge itself. It was that something that I saw overlapping with my IT degree. It was like the same circle that affected my performance in education that would lead to potential discouragement in getting my degree, and that would either fear or lead to affirming people's prejudice. So it was a real objective for me to ensure that there was a sense of belonging and to continue push myself into my IT degree. And this is what I saw as well, with women in tech and women in STEM. With like the like open days, with first year days in Holland. I'm not sure how you say it in English, but I was mostly there to give representation about women in tech or women in IT. And lacking a sense of belonging is something that is just wider than just esports, because every community had to rethink on how it treats women in their spaces. So I remember watching snooker with my dad and seeing a female referee for the first time, not knowing, and he had to point out, this is not really common. She's one of the pioneers. And upon making this presentation, actually came across the article you can see in front of you, which was a really interesting read. I highly recommend reading it. I vividly remember in 2019, when the Women's World Cup came about, the Dutch team reached the finals, and there was a shift in how women's football was viewed, because there was, the celebrations of their success becoming, entering in the finals, and they're coming back from the World Cup, and then they experienced a lot of praise that they've never experienced before. And this is why I think as well, the messaging in mainstream media plays a part of this as well. So past reputation in media, a common view, what I have experienced personally, was pretty mixed. And it mostly came from not fully understanding why we love to consume the media that we do, like that is video games in general. And there was the concerns, and there was like loads of studies, and we really didn't know what to do with that kind of information. And this probably could lead to a great deal of discouragement for anyone who wants to play competitive games, but not knowing that there's a different path to take, if you were not familiar with it already. And it slowly became clear on what the future of esports would look like, with the ongoing growth from Twitch, from their acquirement with Justin TV to leading up to now, newly added as incentives, such as their affiliate program. It was only a matter of time before we could see what the industry, what it is now. So the turnaround was shown, and we went from like we went to big prize pools and developing a new pathway for education and careers, and it became clear how beneficial video games could be in the scope of esports on a long-term basis. And that kind of representation was increasing, and money is obviously also always the big motivator. It just tailors all these times, but what does this mean for women in esports, right? What can we learn from what we've seen from the growth from esports to like a lot of uncertainty and not a lot of understanding, to stigmas, and to then this huge growth into understanding and support and different avenues that they could take? Well, we're seeing a lot of demand, pretty much, and we're seeing the data, and that the engagement is big and continues to grow. And it's important for this reason, because that there's a clear path for potential talent. And this is the driving message from conversations I've seen going around. And this is exactly what we see now in a game called Valorant, where a lot of female players from one game are going to another because of said opportunities that are created, with the power of marketing. We went from a lackluster representation in Counter-Strike for the female scene to now like full 32 team qualifiers in Valorant for women, and bidding wars to get female pro players on board for creating new teams, which is, absolutely fantastic to see. And as a new generation is always around the corner, it's always important to show that it is an avenue to pursue, and these opportunities need to be created. Another example with a game called Dota 2 and Dota Valkyries, and increasing their efforts into increasing female presence and showing that representation is always going to be a big part of this. And that's the pattern that I always see. It's always going to be representation. And this is what I see as well with women in esports putting their best efforts in. When you create representation, you automatically contribute to developing support and encouragement for the doubtful person who has a lot of talent or potentially has a talent that it's not unlocked yet. And an untapped talent is a wasted capital. And this is the reason why I became a committee member, to at least help with this objective. And because when there are opportunities to get funding, support, and amplification, it could shift demographics and make it, or like the industry of esports, more diverse and equal in representation. So this could lead to, removing existing pressures, the pressure I've felt from wanting to feel like I belong, and provide confidence when necessary. And, to coming to the end of all of this, the conclusion really, the answer to most of this is just really boring, because in a sense, it's going to be probably be a lot more improved in 10 years. It's just a matter of time. But it's shown that like money and viewership and, representation, all of those key factors that we've seen from the growth of esports in general could be applied as a, looking at the past is a great motivator. And if this support is continued with added efforts from everyone, it could really, support diversity in esports. So I hope you enjoyed that presentation, and thank you for your time. If there are any questions, I'm not sure if I can answer them now or I have to wait until the Q&A panel. But yeah, thank you all for watching.